United States of America is premised upon basic freedoms and liberties. For example, the right to free speech and be able to share your beliefs and ideas and values publicly. Well, guess what? We have a case we're going to talk about in the second part of the show where that is clearly under attack, where a minister is being criminally prosecuted up in the state of Oregon. And we're going to talk about what we at the Pacific Justice Institute are doing about it. But first, we have with us in studio the attorney for the Pacific Justice Institute who heads up our Orange County office, Southern California office, Michael Peffer. Michael, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Brad.
Now, Michael, you had a big case. We had a big case defending a professor at Moreno Valley Community College who was fired from his job for not doing a bad job, but because he decided to give a balanced perspective, both sides, on a controversial issue that was pending before the United States Supreme Court at the time. Give us the backdrop of what happened to Professor Eric Thompson.
Yes, Eric Thompson, a well-regarded, tenured professor at Moreno Valley College, was doing his job. He's a sociology professor, and of course, sociology is all about the family units, the various social organizations within society, including marriage, oddly enough. And he was talking about the Obergefell case, the case that legalized same-sex marriage. And he made some points by saying, hey, listen, well, what if, a husband and or a brother and sister got married, making points about what this means to our society.
Right.
And as you know, Brad, and we were talking about it back then, this was controversial in society at that point. And so it was not out of the ordinary that Mr. Thompson would be discussing this with his students in the sociology class.
Yeah, and I really appreciate Eric Thompson for what he was doing, we often just are reactive. We say, this should be the way it is. We should give rights to this group or this group, whatever. And we don't think through, exactly what is the rational basis, the logic of this, and what's preventing us from expanding this, for example, to, like, say, incest or polygamy or bestiality and these other things. Now, I don't say that to say that same-sex marriage is the same as these, but we need to think through, as far as the legal perspective, the logic of it, the rational basis of it, how do we distinguish that? And moving forward as a society, I think that was very, very well said of him to have done that. And yet he was fired.
That's right.
Because he presented critical thinking, encouraged critical thinking, presented both sides. What specifically was the position of that college, Moreno Valley Community College?
Well, the college, really led by the so-called diversity committee, which means we accept everybody's view except for Christians,
right?
As it turns out. But they got really up in arms about the statements that he was making. Some of it, as we have come to find out, was really just made up. He didn't say certain things that they said he did. But their position is you can't say the things you're saying. And one of the things I want to relate to you in a second here is what I spoke to the attorney after a hearing we recently went through, and kind of it'll underscore their perspective. But we went to arbitration on this case. As you know, it came to us from another organization that didn't want to take it on. But we took on Mr. Thompson's case, and we've been with him for 2.5 years or something like that now. But we've done a lot of footwork on this.
Well, you specifically have put forth hundreds of hours into this case for this professor. And otherwise, he would have had to come up with 6-digit figures to pay for a private attorney. He didn't have that money. Yeah. He was rejected by another organization. We took it on, a lot of work, a lot of labor, and
right.
The arbitration hearing turned out favorably, didn't it?
It sure did. We went to arbitration, and he was terminated at that point. And the arbitrator heard all the evidence, and believe me, there was a lot of nonsense being testified to. But he heard all the evidence, and he decided, you know what? Termination is inappropriate for Mr. Thompson. He's been twice the Professor of the Year, student voted Professor of the Year. All of his reviews by students is excellent. And so the arbitrator said, okay, I'm going to give him a brief suspension. Perhaps, I wonder if it was like a Solomonic thing. I'm going to split the baby a little bit and let everybody feel like they got their pound of flesh. But they gave him a suspension, and he got to go back to work. The arbitrator ordered that he gets back pay for something like a year and a half of being off of work besides the suspension. And we figured, well, you know what? That's a good result, and our client was very happy with that.
Right.
But that, unfortunately, was not a good result for the district. And what they did is they filed what we call a writ, which is basically a motion now to the next level up court, which was the Superior Court. And they said no, we want to set aside the arbitrator's ruling and order that he be terminated.
Yeah. They were so vehement in their hostility and animosity to this Christian professor, they couldn't deal with the fact that they'd lost at arbitration, that they had done the wrong thing by terminating this professor. So they were so vehement, they wanted to double down, basically appeal this case in layman's language to the next level up, which is the Superior Court.
Yes.
And they didn't mind doing this. And what happened then? You defended him before the Superior Court. What happened? Did they get their way? Did they get to boot him out of town, or did they learn their lesson a second time?
Well, I'm going to say none of the above, because they didn't get their way. That's right, they did not get their way. The court denied their writ and said that the arbitrator's results were supported by the evidence and that it was a reasonable decision given that evidence. And so the court denied their motion, their attempt to set aside the arbitration.
So Eric won for a second time.
That's right.
Second win. Okay.
That's right. And so we're on our way out of the courtroom, and of course our client is ecstatic. He was there with his wife, and our client was ecstatic about the result. And but I spoke to the attorney for the district, and her perspective was that the things that Eric said were illegal, not just wrong-headed, not just foolish, but they were illegal.
Illegal?
Yes. And I say, what? Illegal? She says, well, yes, he used to start his classes by saying that that he is he has a family at home. His wife stays at home and takes care of their children. It's a traditional family. I said, wait a minute, are you saying that that's illegal? Making that? Yes, it makes people feel bad that don't come from that perspective.
Really?
Really.
I just got to say, so professor who reveals that they have a gay partner, a gay spouse, they're not. That speech is not illegal.
Nope.
You know they wouldn't go after a professor with a different family background. They're angry because this professor is not ashamed that he has a traditional family relationship with his wife, his kids. His wife stays at home. And the fact that the wife stays at home, they said that's what insulting to people who are working. I think their position is insulting and demeaning to women who rightfully have the right to choose to be homemakers. There's nothing demeaning about that, and yet their very assertion that his revealing that was somehow making people feel uncomfortable is an insult to his wife. It's an insult to his family. It's an insult to women who want to be able to have that alternative choice.
Right. And it is what has for eons, and mind you, at that time, it was illegal for same-sex marriages. It still wasn't legal anywhere in the country as far as the federal system is concerned.
Right.
And most states had said it's not legal. And so at that time, that was what has been practiced forever.
Right.
And what I think they're doing is looking backwards and going, this is how it ought to be. Forget the notions of academic freedom,
right,
which in fact allow under the First Amendment professors to challenge students. In fact, to make them uncomfortable. That is what the academic freedom doctrine says.
Yeah, it's to encourage them to think beyond their immediate boundary of thinking, promoting critical thinking.
That's right.
That's so important. I think this shows exactly how warped, how hostile, maybe even hateful the Moreno Valley Community College is in their leadership and this, quote, diversity committee.
Right.
Because basically what they're saying is that if you're a professor at their college and you have a traditional marriage, you need to be silent.
That's right.
You have to hide it. You have to be ashamed of it and hide it. But you know for a fact they're not going to have that same position for professors who have gay partners because that's furthering, quote unquote, diversity. Diversity, I think people understand, needs to go both ways. This is not about diversity. People who say that for diversity, no, they're against people with religious backgrounds, traditional family backgrounds. They're in favor of pushing their agenda and pushing it not just as a matter of ideology, but pushing it down the throats and minds of these students that are being paid for to be there by taxpayers in the state of California.
That's right.
Now, Michael, where do we go from here? They're going to appeal this, right?
That's what they're saying. They said afterwards that they're likely to appeal this, which means they're going to appeal this.
Right.
And now we go up to the appellate court level. It's crazy. And actually, after this hearing, I was trying to speak up front with this attorney and telling him that this is silly now. You guys are being silly. This is clearly a good result. Let this thing end.
Learn from your lesson.
Content. That's right.
Let this thing end. Let's move on. Right. But no, their intensity, their animosity,
that's right,
their hatred, I believe, and bitterness is so strong, they're not even logical in how they're representing, they're making their decisions for Moreno Valley Community College. Shame on them.
Indeed.
But you're doing a great job. Professor Eric Thompson is maintaining his countenance, and Lord willing, he's going to prevail in the end on appeal. We're going to continue at Pacific Justice to defend him, and hopefully society will learn from this that true tolerance goes both ways. Thank you, Michael.
My name is Eric Thompson. I'm a father of 8. We live in Hemet, California. It's real nice out here, nice and quiet, not much going on. I like to play guitar and bake bread in my free time. My experience at Moreno Valley College was largely positive. I was hired in 2005, and I really had a great time as a professor there teaching sociology. I like sociology because it's the study of human beings and human behavior and the study of society itself, its changes. The administration had, previous to this, had a problem with my showing a film called Understanding Same-Sex Attraction. This video gives the testimony of 4 or 5 men who they got therapy and they were actually able to see themselves attracted to someone of the opposite sex. I presented both sides of the issue. Is it biological? Is it social? The nature-nurture debate. After the 2014 investigation, there was another investigation in 2015. The Supreme Court was deliberating on the very important Obergefell decision regarding same-sex marriage. In class in 2015, we had a great discussion about this subject. And it largely went well, except for a student of mine, an older student of mine, who objected and eventually left the room. She went to the president of the college, went to several faculty and complained. She thought all along by even discussing Obergefell, we were treading on thin ice in her mind, and she became very offended at our even discussing the topic. And I take a neutral stand when it comes to these sensitive issues, because when we're trying to tease out in their minds what they really believe, it's not good. It's not helpful for me to jump in and say, well, this is what I believe. I was investigated a 3rd time, and that was because of a grade I gave a student. I gave her a D, and she complained that it was because that I thought she was a lesbian, and I didn't even know her identity, her status. Well, I wrote her a letter, emailed her, stating I didn't know she was a lesbian, and wished her well, etc., and asked her if she would reconsider. I also gave a copy to the administration. The administration had me in their office and confiscated my office keys and had me get a few things from my office and escorted me off campus with 2 police officers because they claimed that I had violated an order not to contact the student, which they never gave me. When I got the notice of intent to terminate, I contacted Pacific Justice Institute, Michael Peffer, and he was great. He understood my position, my situation, and he went right to work to help me to sort of get untangled from the mess the district had put me in. Michael wrote a great closing brief, and he was so effective that we, in October, found out that we had won arbitration, and I was granted my job back. So I'm very grateful to PJI, to Michael Peffer. They're an excellent organization, excellent team, and they really stand for justice.
Professor Eric Thompson was fired for doing his job. He was a master about inspiring discussion in a sociology class about important issues. This professor was unjustly treated by the administration, and that's why we at Pacific Justice Institute stepped in. We were honored to represent such an outstanding professor without charge. If you know of someone in a similar situation, have them contact Pacific Justice Institute. We're here to help. And folks, if you'd like to support the Pacific Justice Institute, become a part of our team, it's real easy to do that. Just go to our website. It's pacificjustice.org, pacificjustice.org, or even easier, you go to pji.org, P for Pacific, J for Justice, I for Institute.org, pji.org. And there you can also sign up to get our free resources. You can also sign up to get our Legal Insider. It's our weekly update via email. It's short, and it gives you the inside information of what's taking place. Oftentimes you won't hear about it in the news, but it's significant to the work that we're doing here at Pacific Justice Institute for religious freedom, parental rights, and/or the sanctity of human life. So go to our website, pji.org, and sign up to get our wonderful resources that we have there, all without charge, as well as become a part of our team. We really appreciate both the prayers as well as financial support of so many out there who are a part of our team who make this work possible. Now, we have with us on the line our attorney from our Oregon office, Ray Hacke. Ray, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here, Brad.
Now, Ray, you've been involved in a very important case. I know you're really busy with a number of cases up there in the state of Oregon, but this case is really interesting because it's dealing with a basic fundamental issue of our right to free speech under the First Amendment of the Constitution. And apparently, the city of Portland isn't very respectful of that when it comes to an individual named Mark Mayberry, who simply wants to be able to preach the gospel in a public place. Who is Mark Mayberry? What's his background?
Mark's from Riddle, which is a rural community in southern Oregon. He has a big heart for evangelism, and so he likes to travel around to different parts of the state, usually about once or twice a month, to share the gospel and speak out against abortion. He's very soft-spoken, has a very gentle nature. He'll speak the unvarnished truth, but he tempers it with love and grace, especially when speaking to people one-on-one.
So what happened to Mark back in June, early June? What happened to him?
Well, Mark was at Waterfront Park in Portland with a group of fellow open-air evangelists on June 1st. One of his fellow evangelists was preaching, and he was off to the side, a few feet behind him, holding an anti-abortion sign, passing out anti-abortion tracts, and just trying to engage people in conversation. All very tame stuff. Suddenly, a park officer comes along and orders Mark to stop what he's doing and leave the park immediately.
Okay, so he's given this pro-life message, solid from a Christian biblical worldview, solid pro-life message. He didn't leave, though, did he? Why not?
Well, this isn't Mark's first rodeo when it comes to open-air evangelism and being harassed by the police. He knows his freedoms of speech and religion are protected under both the Oregon and federal constitutions. He wasn't about to just fold and just let the park officer trample on his constitutional rights.
So what did the park officer end up doing?
The officer issued him a citation, excluding him from Waterfront Park for 30 days.
Okay, okay. On what grounds did he issue this citation? This makes no sense at all.
The officer cited Mark for violating a city ordinance that required him to obey all reasonable orders of a park officer. However, the same ordinance also declares that an officer's order is not reasonable if it's aimed at constitutionally protected speech-related conduct. That's why the officer also cited Mark for harassment, which is a misdemeanor here in Oregon.
Okay, harassment? Harassment? Are you kidding me? He actually accused him of harassment of the officer because he didn't allow him to violate his First Amendment rights?
I was incredulous too. Oregon's criminal harassment statute defines harassment as insults and verbally abusive speech that is intended to, or even just likely, to provoke violence. Mark didn't do anything of the sort. He might have said some things that offended some people, but saying something that might offend someone doesn't automatically constitute harassment. If that were the case, no one ever would be able to say anything, and free speech protections would be meaningless. I should also tell you that no criminal complaint was ever filed against Mark, which makes his exclusion from Waterfront Park even more ridiculous.
Yeah, so this park officer decides to trounce on his First Amendment rights and come up with actions of assessments of harassment, which are totally not unjustified. Someone preaching the gospel, preaching the good news of life and being pro-life, that's not harassment. So what did we at the Pacific Justice Institute do to go to bat for Mark in this terrible situation that was brought against him?
Well, after Mark contacted PJI, we filed an appeal with the Portland City Auditor's Office on his behalf. The city auditor granted a hearing, and Mark traveled roughly 200 miles from Southern Oregon all the way up to Portland to be there. At the hearing, we presented testimony from Mark, as well as from a fellow evangelist, Mason Goodnight. We explained how Mark was not obligated to obey the park officer because the officer's order was not reasonable. We also explained how Mark's speech did not meet the legal criminal standard for harassment. Okay.
Now, Ray, the city auditor, I assume they did the right thing, that they ultimately did side with Mark on this, right?
Yes, that's correct. The hearing officer said he would issue an order invalidating Mark's exclusion from Waterfront Park. Had the hearing officer not done that, Mark could potentially be excluded from Waterfront Park a lot longer should he get cited there again.
Now, the city of Portland, my understanding, Ray, is that the city of Portland has gotten in trouble for trampling on Christian evangelist rights in the past, free speech rights before, hasn't it? I mean, this is not the first time we've caught them engaging in this outrageous harassment, persecution of people who want to preach and be open with their faith and evangelize, right? This is not the first time.
That's correct, Brad. There's a case called Gathright v. City of Portland in which the Ninth Circuit upheld a permanent injunction prohibiting the city from removing people engaged in evangelism activities from city parks without probable cause. That case also involved a street preacher at Waterfront Park, same place where Mark got cited.
Same place?
I've been told there's even a sign there. Same place.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been told there's even a sign there now stating the terms of the injunction. So it's pretty brazen of the city to go on trampling on people's constitutionally protected rights in the face of that injunction.
Well, apparently the city hasn't learned its lesson at this point. But so what's going to happen to the city of Portland now?
Well, Mark's happy he's won his case before the city auditor, but his hearing should never have had to happen in the first place. PJI is planning to draft and file a lawsuit charging the city of Portland with contempt of court for violating the permanent injunction. The city really does not seem to understand that it cannot silence evangelists based on the content of their speech. The city needs to get that hammered into a thick skull, and we're hoping to bring the full force of the law down on the city to do it.
Yeah, and I will tell you, Ray, I know you're going to be representing him, And folks, Ray Hacke, the attorney who heads up our office there in the state of Oregon. My nickname for Ray is Bulldog, by the way, because he is a tough litigator. He's a man. He's a great Christian guy, loves the Lord, but he is a strong, professional, highly skilled advocate for those who are under attack. Before, Ray, you were in our San Francisco office, area office. You were very busy there, of course, and now you're heading up the office there in the state of Oregon. I know you're going to do a great job defending Mark. The city of Portland, folks. This is a very outrageous city with a reputation of intolerance, harassment towards people who simply want to live their faith. They simply want to share the good news of Jesus Christ. In the United States of America, that should be freely protected. It is protected under the First Amendment of the Constitution, the Free Speech Clause, the Free Exercise Clause, and yet some cities, like the city of Portland, just simply don't seem to get it. I want you out there, folks out there who are listening to this broadcast, I want you to be praying for Mark. Maybe I pray for him that he'll have the endurance to continue the work that God's called him to do, to be able to share the good news of Jesus lovingly and clearly to people in the Portland and that whole area. Also, I want you to pray for our attorney, Ray Hacke, that he'll have the stamina with this case and the many other cases he's handling up there. He's often outgunned, but when you have truth on your side and with people praying, we see incredible things happen at the Pacific Justice Institute. So lift him up in prayer as well. And I want to thank those of you, once again, who support the work of Pacific Justice Institute. That's how we do our work. By God's grace, it's people out there like you who choose to be informed, who go to our website to get our case updates, the Legal Insider Update, but also don't just watch, but become a part of the team and support our work on either a monthly or a one-time basis. So, folks, there you have it. It's our God-given freedoms we're talking about now. Now, let's choose to keep them. I'm Brad Dacus, president of the Pacific Justice Institute. Have a great weekend.